Hulk, Shrek, giants among us. Gigantism, a gift or a curse? Today, I will tell you about the origins of the giants, or rather rare disease gigantism, or acromegaly. This disease is characterized by abnormal growth of the human body, especially the limbs. Acromegaly also affects the face, deforming its features. For the first time in history, giants were mentioned in the myths of ancient Greece. Giants are Tritons from ancient Greek mythology. According to Hesiod, the giants are deities, sons of Gaia, the earth goddess, who was impregnated with drops of blood from Uranus, the god of heaven, and the seed of her second husband, the cruel and terrible deity of Tartarus. According to Homer, giants are wild, gigantic, related to the gods, being born of Gaia. Legend has it that the king of the giants, Eurymedon, was killed by the gods along with all of his people. The most famous giant in mythology is Goliath, a huge Philistine warrior, a descendant of the Rephaim giants of the Old Testament. As legend has it, his height was 287 centimeters. Goliath is known for his battle with David. Young David, the future king of Judah and Israel, defeated Goliath in a duel with a sling, an ancient weapon for throwing stones. Folklore, of course, is also full of tales about giants. Jack the Giant Killer, Little Giant, Ordinary Giant, the Brave Tailor. At all times, very tall people with unusual appearances caused different sensations, from interest and admiration to fear and horror. Of course, these were not fabulous giants, but ordinary people suffering from gigantism. This phenomenon has always interested not only ordinary people, but also scientists. Some research on acromegaly began with the digging of the Egyptian pyramids. Scientists have studied and continue to study ancient burials, mummies of pharaohs, to find out how they lived, what they were sick with, and for what reasons people died thousands of years ago. Among the many diseases of interest to scientists, there are rare diseases such as gigantism and acromegaly, because they leave marks on the bones of skeletons. A team of researchers from Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Australia, which included Francesco Galassi of the Institute for Evolutionary Medicine at the University of Zurich, a well-known specialist in paleopathology, proposed a new diagnosis of the Third Dynasty pharaoh, Sanecht, who ruled Egypt in the 27th century BC. The tomb of Sanecht was discovered in 1901 during excavations near the Egyptian village of Beit Khalif. The height of the deceased, according to the measurements of the preserved bones, exceeded 187 centimeters, while the average height of the Egyptians of his era was 167 centimeters. The first researchers were inclined to attribute the outstanding growth of Sanecht to good living conditions and nutrition compared to ordinary Egyptians. But still, Sanecht was much larger than the other pharaohs whose remains were discovered. The next largest after Sanecht was Ramses II, who lived 1,000 years later, whose height is 175 centimeters. Scientists have reanalyzed the skull and long bones of Sanecht's limbs and announced the discovery of signs of rapid bone growth characteristic of gigantism. Among the historical figures in the scientific literature, Akhenaten, the Egyptian pharaoh, the husband of Queen Nefertiti, who lived in the 14th century BC, is also mentioned as possibly suffering from acromegaly. It is impossible to confirm the fact of the disease of the pharaoh scientifically. When scientists opened his tomb, Akhenaten's mummy was not there. It was probably reburied elsewhere. However, quite a lot of images and statues of the pharaoh have been preserved, most of which show him tall, with long legs and arms, an elongated face with large features. Attempts have been made to explain the unusual depictions of Akhenaten by the presence of an illness accompanied by physical abnormalities in the pharaoh. There have been suggestions that Akhenaten had acromegaly. Patients with this syndrome are tall, with elongated bones of the arms and legs, an elongated face, a wide pelvis, features that can be found in the images of Akhenaten. However, attempts to diagnose a disease based on the works of art are quite conditional. Given the lack of unambiguously identified remains of Akhenaten, it is problematic to check such an assumption. Hypotheses about the presence of Akhenaten acromegaly remained unconfirmed. The medical term gigantism is translated from ancient Greek as titan, jumbo. Gigantism implies a pathological condition in which there is excessive growth of the trunk and limbs, or certain parts of the body. Gigantism and acromegaly are two age-related variations of the same pathological processes: excessive growth and functioning of the cells of the pituitary gland, the brain appendage which produces hormones that affect growth, metabolism, and reproductive function in the body. Gigantism occurs when increased production of growth hormone begins in childhood, even before growth plates are closed. That is, while the areas of growing tissue at the end of the bones in children and adolescents continue to grow. Acromegaly, associated with increased production of growth hormone, begins in adulthood. At the same time, various anomalies of bones and soft tissues develop. Often, the development of gigantism occurs simultaneously with other endocrine diseases: insufficient or excessive thyroid function, diabetes mellitus, and diabetes insipidus. Due to high growth rates, the internal organs do not always have time to cope with the increased load, which can cause diseases of the heart, lungs, and liver. Increased production of growth hormone can occur with lesions of the pituitary gland due to tumors of the gland, for example, pituitary adenoma, intoxication, brain injuries, brain infections such as encephalitis, meningitis, meningoencephalitis. Gigantism in children is also called macrosomia. This disease develops in children and adolescents with incomplete ossification of the skeleton. Excessive growth of the body or its individual parts occurs against the background of excessive secretion of somatotropin growth hormone, secreted by the pituitary gland, or increased sensitivity of the growth plates of bones to it. A similar condition can develop against the background of infections of the central nervous system, craniocerebral injuries, benign or malignant tumors. Macrosomia is more common in male adolescents, is determined already at the age of 9 to 13 years, and progresses throughout the entire period of physiological growth. With gigantism, the child's growth rate and its performance far exceed the physiological norm and reach more than 190 centimeters in women and 200 centimeters in men by the end of puberty, while maintaining a relatively proportional physique. Women's height over 195 centimeters is considered pathological, men's over 210 centimeters. Gigantism in children occurs from 1 to 3 cases per 1,000. Parents of patients suffering from this pathology are usually of normal height. Gigantism must be distinguished from genetic tall stature. Unlike a disease associated with increased production of growth hormone, familial tall stature has a clearly defined heredity, and growth stops after the growth plates are closed. High stature is inherited from parents to children. Gigantism is not an inherited disease. Tall athletes, basketball players, volleyball players, in general, do not belong to patients with gigantism. If the increased production of somatotropin continues after the ossification of the bone growth plates, acromegaly develops in a person. And after cartilaginous ossification and closure of the bone growth plates, it turns to acromegaly. Besides, acromegaly develops when a tumor occurs in the body after the growth plates are closed. If a child's parents go to an endocrinologist because of excessive growth, the doctor will immediately suspect gigantism. The main task in this case is to confirm the diagnosis, as well as to rule out other conditions with similar symptoms, such as genetic tall stature. Gigantism is confirmed by laboratory tests that reveal an excessive amount of somatotropin hormone. To clarify the cause of the disease and identify related problems in a child, a number of studies are being conducted. First of all, X-rays, computed tomography, magnetic resonance imaging of the skull and brain are performed. An X-ray of the arm bones is also prescribed to assess bone age. To make a diagnosis, specialists such as an ophthalmologist, andrologist, gynecologist, surgeon, and other doctors are extensively involved. They conduct an ophthalmological examination, determine the level of reproductive hormones, the condition of the joints.